And welcome to the ID Talk podcast. My name is Tony, and I'm here as always with my lovely co-host and my friend, Mr. Alex Perala. Alex, hello.
Good day, Tony.
Good day. Happy Monday. And we are joined today by Jillian Kossman, COO of IDscan.net. Jillian, thank you so much for joining us. To get us started, why don't you just give our audience kind of a breakdown of your own background, how you came to be at IDscan.net, and what you guys do?
Sure. Hey guys, it's so great to be here. Love the pod. Yep, my name's Jillian Kossman, Chief Operating Officer at IDscan.net. IDscan.net is a 20-year-old identity verification technology company based in New Orleans, Louisiana. My background has always been in B2B SaaS, but a little bit all over the place. I spent some years in loyalty tech and some years in cybersecurity before I joined here. Kind of interestingly, in loyalty tech, worked a lot with hotels and airlines. In cybersecurity, obviously worked with a lot of like B2B endpoint detection, threat detection models. So a lot of synergy that was helpful when I entered the IDV and identity proofing space. IDscan.net covers kind of both your digital identity verification scenarios, kind of what I think gets the most chatter in the industry, digital IDV, mobile IDs, but also brick and mortar physical ID authentication, which is our sweet spot and has been for the past 20 years in business.
Okay, and is that like is it just to clarify on what IDscan.net does? Is it all like software driven, or like are you guys in hardware as well for any of that?
We're a software company. We resell, many of the document readers. If you've gone through the TSA line and you've seen that little bread box loaf, that eSeek M500, we resell and are integrated with that. We do not manufacture any of our hardware. We partner with, Thales, eSeek, HID, the big guys, and then integrate our software with their hardware.
Okay, cool. Yeah, one thing that was interesting to us, just doing a bit of research about IDscan.net was, as you said, it's like 2 decades old. And you've been there a few years, but do you get a sense, like talking to the leadership, who have been there like maybe since the beginning or for a long time, how they've experienced the changes in the kind of like threat landscape and in identity fraud and in the tech to fix it? Because a lot has changed in that period, and I feel like we're in kind of a whole new era now with AI.
Yes. So our CTO and co-founder has been with us since the beginning. He started the business a few years out of grad school here in New Orleans, and he actually started the business as like a custom job shop. And their first job in the space was for a Get Out the Vote campaign, and the Get Out the Vote campaign wanted to host these like mobile voter registration drives, and they were like, "Wouldn't it be neat if we could just scan someone's ID and pull in the information into the voter registration system?" And so the founder kind of built this tech for them and was like, "Hey, what are some applications for this?" So he's seen it go from like not even every state has an ID with a barcode on it to now we're in the mobile ID landscape, and states have APIs with digital signatures on them to verify the document. And then, of course, we've seen the rise in deepfakes and having to train our AI on thousands of deepfake images to kind of stay ahead of the curve, because fraudsters are getting, just so advanced in their ability to use the same tools that we've been using for a decade. Now, in the past 2 years, the fraudsters are able to use those same tools.
Mhm.
And so it's a constant arms race.
I mean, yeah, just continuing on that, like we have been, because of the nature of what we do, we've been keeping a very close eye on the space for a while now. And like you said, I mean, over the last few years, going from um, yeah, there's a few states, specifically talking about the down in the US, that are really pushing adoption of this tech to it's everywhere now. And I think we're still a little bit behind the eight ball here in Canada, but it's been not surprising, but just kind of impressive to sit back and see how much acceleration has like really picked up over the last few years in the adoption, the widespread adoption of mobile IDs. And I mean, do you see that continuing? Do you think there's like more room for that to sort of take hold, or do you think there's just still some major obstacles that need to be overcome in order for it to not be a thing that we're like, oh, it's kind of like a bit of a surprise?
Gosh, this is like my favorite topic to talk about, but it's definitely going to get me in trouble with my friends at Apple. But I'm happy. I'm going to chat about it because I think um, mobile IDs, I love them. I mean, as soon as they came out, we immediately went to Apple, integrated their SDK into our mobile apps so that our customers could tap to verify. Um, and here in Louisiana, we were actually the first state to launch a digital ID, like one of the first places in the entire world to have a digital credential. And Louisiana's had a really, really high take rate on those. I think 75% or more of eligible adults in the state have them, as compared to like Alaska, where I think in the first 6 months of having their digital ID, like 400 people installed it.
Mm,
But Louisiana has a really high adoption for a couple reasons. One, the presentment mode of the digital credential is very similar to a physical ID. You can scan it in the same way. You don't need NFC or Bluetooth to interact with the document. That makes a lot of people unhappy because it doesn't follow the ISO protocols for digital IDs. But if I'm a bar and I have a ID scanner, or I'm a car dealership and I have an ID scanner, I can actually interact with this MDL without a bunch of additional tech. So that's why adoption's been so high. The other
mm,
reason why Louisiana's MDL is so high is because the state passed a law a couple of years ago for age verification for adult websites. The major company ALO, that I think they're based in the Toronto area. They run like Pornhub, RedTube, all the major porn sites. The state or the MDL creator of the wallet went to ALO and they integrated. So now you can click to verify your age to look at adult content on all the major websites using your Louisiana LA wallet. And adoption went from like 30% to 75% in 6 months once they
wow.
did that. So there's some interesting drivers, ease of use, and also like major integrations into age verification, gates in everyday Louisiana life. The landscape is still so fragmented. Apple has a very privacy first model. So if you want to read an MDL right now, you have to go you know, get a certification from Apple saying like, this is why I need every single piece of information and how long I'm planning to store it. And here's my cybersecurity infrastructure. And I think that's left a lot of businesses like, well, gosh, if you're going to make me jump through all those hoops, then I'll just keep reading the physical IDs. This isn't worth it. You're saying I need to go get this entitlement request and I need additional hardware. There's a lot of kind of hoops that you have to jump through.
Hmm.
Then there's the whole subset of apps called the mid apps, which are created by IDEMIA. And IDEMIA is the company that has the big TSA contract that was just bought by Amadeus. Those apps charge you to read the MDL. So if you want to tap and read a mid app from like Iowa, IDEMIA wants to have a contract with you or your tech provider and wants to charge you $1 to read it. So again, there's another gate that's been thrown up with businesses just saying like, I'm not going to pay $1 every time I need to scan someone's ID for them to, make a purchase or rent a car. To heck with that. I'll just continue reading physical IDs. So I think a lot of the wallet providers have really cool tech. Customers love them. They're great at the TSA, but businesses are left like, wow, you've made this very difficult for us to engage with. So right now, really the only reliable place a consumer can use their MDL is to go through TSA and some e-commerce experiences and some digital banking experiences. So it's just, there's not a ton of real world use cases for it yet. So everybody just still carries their physical ID, and then, it kind of obviates the need for the MDL. So I think we've still got a long way to go in terms of ease of adoption, making everything really simple, and enabling businesses to interact with these credentials.
Yeah, I'm curious to get your take also about like the role of culture sort of in this as well, because you mentioned, the adoption rate is so low in Alaska and like compared to Louisiana. And one thing that's interested me as we've covered this over the years, we've sort of at our publication, we've kind of been tracking it from the beginning, and I was personally surprised to see it become kind of like politicized almost. It's not quite like a partisan politics thing, but there's definitely like a ideological like aspect to some of the resistance to mobile ID. I'm just curious what your take is on that, if you have one.
I guess from the beginning, I've noticed that it was kind of contrary to what I maybe expected. I thought that more tech forward states would be the first to adopt, but it was actually the opposite. And you saw like Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama were some of
Mm,
the first states. All those states kind of launched programs on their own off the side of their desk without buying into the wider ecosystem. So a lot of them have had to then go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, we'll do it ISO compliant now. Like we had our own Alabama thing, but we'll do it your way. Um, but I think we've seen the more tech forward states are much more privacy centric. They're very focused on like, let's make sure everything about this MDL is locked down. Let's make sure we know who's going to read and access it. And that's driving, I think, some of Apple's privacy preserving ethos with
mhm.
these credentials is those states, and especially California.
Yeah, so it's like it's maybe different like attitudes towards privacy and regulations and maybe being a bit scared of regulations as well, or like being terrorized into making sure you're compliant all the time.
I think that states with
Mhm.
more developed tech infrastructures in the private sector generally have more developed tech infrastructures when it comes to public programs, the DMV included. So,
Mm.
you know, the California DMV is much, much more advanced and more modern than the DMV in other states. And so with that, that comes like anything they do that's a public service that's technology like issuance of a mobile credential, it has to be thought through, and we need to have a lot of working groups and make sure it fits into our ecosystem, and let's go to some global conferences to make sure we're following best practices. Whereas some of the smaller you know states that are on the opposite side of the political spectrum, they're just gung ho. They're like, let's go. Like, this sounds great. Let's build our own. I
Mhm.
know a guy. So I think we've seen kind of two different approaches to MDLs across the political spectrum. But I mean, they're starting to coalesce now because everybody realizes, like, if I don't follow the protocol and nobody can read this, then all this work was for nothing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I know this isn't the same thing at all, but I feel like it kind of we kind of got an experience recently with like us personally, Alex and I, um, with regards to different regulations in different regions on a more global scale because we were in Europe 2 weeks ago for Identity Week and just checking my phone to check a sports score, I was like, why do I have to opt into so many things now? Like there are so many GDPR related things that I had to accept, checking the weather. Basically every app that I opened on my phone for that week, for the first time, I was opting into stuff. And I was like, oh, that's right, because things here like privacy wise and regulatory wise are on a whole other league than what we're used to in Toronto. And so I was just like, oh, this is what it must be like when you're dealing with MDLs or just different states and governments in places like the US where you guys have all these things happening across several different jurisdictions.
Yeah, I mean, the US, Canada, and Australia, a couple other countries are really distinct, but the US and Canada are especially distinct in that, like, our primary identity credential is not issued federally.
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
ID card comes from the French government. If you're in one state or another, you're still getting the same card. Your driver's license is issued by France, not your state. Whereas in the US, most people's primary ID is issued at the state level. DMV systems do not talk to each other. The IDs follow all different formats. And so that creates just a lot of chatter. It's also a huge moat for a company like ours, right? Like it takes a while to build a database of all the identity documents that you could possibly have that are legal in circulation in the US. Whereas you
Yeah.
go to England and it's like, there's one driver's license and it looks like this. And it always looks like this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
Amazing.
simpler. Could you talk a bit about the fraud threat with mobile IDs? Because like I think everyone intuitively knows what it means to have a fake physical ID, but is there like an equivalent? Have you like have you encountered this that people are trying to make like fake mobile IDs and use them in real life? Or what is the fraud threat there?
So there's two levels of fraud threat. One is kind of your easy attempt to hoodwink someone fraudster, and that's typically just somebody who's modifying some screenshots and hoping that they can get by with like, oh, your Bluetooth must not be reading my card. They'll have a little animated video that makes it appear as though you're trying to read their credential. Oh, it's not going through. And that can actually fool a lot of people because the people accepting IDs today are not super familiar with MDLs. There is a high likelihood that they're somewhere in the Bluetooth and NFC transfer that something goes wrong. So, a smart fraudster can use the newness of the technology to their advantage really, really easily. And then the second would be like a true impersonation by creating your own digital credential, matching the standards of the jurisdiction you're trying to impersonate. And then when somebody asks, hey, can you present Texas doesn't have one, but let's say Texas, for example, present your Texas ID. Somebody pulls up something that's not a Texas ID, but somehow mimics the Bluetooth and the NFC transfer, and that goes through.
Yeah. And yeah, so it's like pretty sophisticated. But I guess with AI, that's like increasingly easy just for anybody to do. Which was kind of my other question is like, because you're obviously still tackling a lot of physical IDs as well. Have you noticed a change in the quality of the quality of fraud? Just because like, people can generate really sophisticated images now with AI.
Definitely. You know, they can generate images of IDs, even physical IDs that are very high quality really quickly. And then they can generate facial images, and they can even generate facial videos. So you need really robust, AI powered itself fraud detection to catch these guys now. But I still find that even in the era of deepfakes and all these sophisticated tools, like most fraud is still traditional photoshopping, or I printed out a picture and I'm holding it in front of my face to fool the face matching. Like still the majority of fraud is, I think, of the less sophisticated variety, but we're seeing more and more, especially when we talk about fraud in industries like education, where people are trying to impersonate like young people. We find that there's a higher instance of deepfake fraud.
Hmm. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, and I also like along those lines, I was curious if you've seen, and you might not have like all the data going back to the beginning of idscan.net,
I
but
wish I did.
do you have like an idea of how much fraud has escalated in that time, and especially in recent years? Like we see reports all the time that like there's 50% more of this type of fraud over the last year. So I'm just curious what the bigger picture is, since idscan.net, it sounds like, is concerned with like all kinds of IDs, like physical and mobile. So just curious about your perspective there.
We're seeing fraud go up. We track it on an industry level, so it's a little bit different in most industries. Broadly, over our time in business, we found that fraud is inversely correlated with the economy. So, when we were first kind of a fresh new business in the great financial crisis, fraud was really, really high. That was a huge accelerator for our business because businesses were like, please, I need something. I'm getting killed. Then fraud tampered down a little bit. COVID fraud shot back up, especially because a lot of businesses like opened a new digital channel for the first time, did not put any guardrails in place, and fraudsters just had a field day. And that's when I think you saw like the stocks and just the proliferation of IDV companies in that 2020 to 2022 era. Then I feel like fraud kind of simmered down for a little bit. And then now, with just broader financial pressures that we're seeing in the economy, as well as access to the tools of AI, we're seeing, fraud attempts greatly, greatly increase. The biggest industries we're seeing fraud increase in are cargo and logistics. So theft of cargo and goods using fake IDs, obviously finance, banking, e-banking, fraud's steadily climbing in that space. We're seeing a ton of, use of deepfakes in that space. Education, I know there's federal legislation pending now around trying to clamp down on ghost students that's going to require ID verification. Um, we see a ton of fraud and growing there. I think the fraudsters are trying to have their last gasp before the federal legislation because it's just they're nuts. It's like throwing some meat to some piranhas right now. They're all over it. Um, so that's broadly where we're seeing like the highest increases in fraud today. Where we're seeing a little bit of a decrease is maybe in automotive. I feel like automotive businesses have done a really good job of implementing technology. So they're seen as a little bit less of a soft target than they would have been 4 or 5 years ago. So fraud's kind of stable in that space.
Hmm.
And then we, through our time, we've always served a lot of age restricted businesses, and those businesses, I would say, are kind of stable. Obviously, that's not fraud in the sense that somebody's trying to steal stuff. It's a young person trying to, gain access to products they shouldn't have.
Mhm.
But I think young people having less money, young people maybe drinking less, we're seeing kind of stable in the hospitality space as well.
That's
That's
that's all
interesting.
really interesting. And I'm surprised that I'm not familiar with a couple of these. So I'm just hoping you can explain a bit more like cargo fraud. That I don't think I've come across that so far. So can you like explain how that works? And also ghost students, like what Tony and I are always doing side scan businesses. So like we're looking for ideas as
Constantly.
well. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me tell you how to make some money.
yeah.
So cargo theft
Oh,
is people driving off with loads of cargo. I'm sure you saw like in the news a couple of weeks ago, somebody drove off with a $1.6 million truck of condoms. And like maybe a month ago in Europe, somebody drove off with a 600K load of Kit Kats. And a lot of that fraud is somebody shows up and says, I'm Bob, I'm the legitimate driver, and they present a fake ID.
Mm,
So the shippers and the logistics companies are now rapidly trying to verify their drivers. There's also been a lot of kind of legislative interest around what are called non-domicile CDLs, which are CDLs that don't require you to live in a jurisdiction and are frequently used by fraudsters. So we've seen a lot of interest in clamping down there. So, illegitimate IDs used to steal truckloads of cargo, that's a huge trend right now. And one we're very much on top of. And then ghost students. So if you think about, in the US, you can get federal loans or private loans to go to school. You
mhm.
can get those whether you go to Harvard or you go to community college, you can apply for federal loans. So people are creating synthetic identities or stealing identities of young people and then applying for loans, having a check sent to their house or having the money dumped in their account, and then never showing up to class or enrolling in school. It's a huge problem. It's been a hot topic due to the emphasis on kind of fraud, waste, and abuse in the US government. So there's legislation to clamp down and force all federal aid providers and schools to do ID verification before disbursement and enrollment to try and stop the bleeding on these loans.
okay, that's interesting.
That's
Tony,
interesting.
I hope you were taking notes just now.
Yeah, I've already been practicing. I think you know what? I think it's kind of I was just thinking about something. It's maybe like a side effect of working in this industry, and I hope neither of you can relate to what I'm about to say, but uh I'm starting to find that when I have just like everybody, I have one email account that's basically all junk. Like it's
Mhm.
5,000 unread messages, and very rarely do I check it with any real but the other day I got it showed up on my phone as a notification, and it was like Mike five numbers at gmail.com, and the subject was like PayPal invoice problem with like exclamation points, and it had attached, I didn't click on it obviously, but it was like some phony PayPal invoice. I haven't used PayPal in a while. And so I kind of got like a pang of nostalgia, like slash pity, because this is like an updated phishing attempt or fraud attempt that with AI and with what we just talked about, like these fraudsters are either desperately trying to catch up with the times or are just like maybe I'll cast a wide net with this PayPal scam or whatever the scam is. Do you think that uh the like rapid evolving nature of fraud with AI is going to lead to more widespread sophisticated attacks? Like, am I going to get an email that I'm like, oh, this looks legitimate, or more highly targeted, sophisticated attacks where those fraudsters aren't going to bother trying to send me like some dope an email to trick me out of $100, and they'll just focus their efforts on like larger scale fraud.
I think it's got to be both, right? Like, my email inbox is full of like AI sales agents trying to sell me something because it just makes it so easy to spam
Mhm.
a ton of people at once. So I think volume is going to increase because a human doesn't even actually have to send any of the emails. You can just blast it out using
Yeah.
a fraudster agent. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think AI can increasingly handle the like more complex decisioning that it would take. Okay, these guys opened, what should the next move be to get the next piece of information we need to complete the fraudulent transaction? So I really think it's going to be both.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think that's a good bet. And yeah, I think we have just a couple minutes left. So I wanted to ask, you mentioned that I think this was before we started recording, but you had marketing roles in a few different industries that are, sort of loosely overlapping. And then coming to this industry, what we have found, Tony and I, is like a consistent thing we hear from vendors in identity tech is frustration with communications and frustration
Mhm.
with PR and consumers or like government regulators or whoever not really like fully understanding what they're trying to do or what the problem is that they're trying to solve. So I'm just curious from your like with your marketing hat on, what if we can go a bit meta, like what are you frustrated about with in terms of like messaging, like what message are people not understanding that you wish they could?
Well, I think one thing that vexes me, and I know it vexes a lot of the other companies similar to us in the space, is end users not really understanding like why IDV benefits them as well. And we were talking about very privacy centric culture in certain areas. So we get a lot of outreach of like, you scanned my face, I'm going to sue you. This is horrible. I did not consent to this. And they don't actually realize like it's for your protection. We want to make sure that you're the rightful person to open this account or to purchase this car and that you're presenting legitimate credentials. If we don't if we don't offer these tools and place it in the buying journey, somebody could say that they're Alex, and you know go cash a check or get access to your bank account. Like it does benefit you um, to engage in the IDV space. Um, so I think that kind of consumer sentiment is one of the biggest challenges that all of us face. Is no one wants to feel like they're being spied on. Nobody wants their transactions slowed down, but it's just a must now to
Mhm.
ensure that people's identities aren't getting stolen.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And I mean, I think, part of the solution is just having conversations like this and getting them out there. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the show. And I hope we can have another chat like this again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All
Thanks,
right.
Jillian.